Hello and welcome. In a few hours from now, Donald Trump takes over as the 47th President of the United States. This has enormous implications for the world in general and India in particular. And joining me today on News 9 is Rajeev Chandrasekhar, senior BJP leader, to discuss the implications of Donald Trump's presidency for India. Rajeev, welcome to News 9.
Thanks, Sandeep.
First impressions, Donald Trump, good for India, bad for India?
No, I don't think anybody should try hazard that guess. I think he's going to be good for US. I think he's a very America first type of a president he will be. He always was, even in his first term. And I think surrounded as he has by big tech companies of the US, it is safe to assume that we will face some challenges. But also I believe that the American-Indian alliance, the partnership that has, in a sense, gotten very strong in the areas of big tech and critical tech, will go even further and become stronger going forward. But the relationship will not be without its challenges. And I wrote a piece recently that says, fasten your seatbelts. It's going to be a bumpy ride. But the trajectory of the ride, I believe, if you normalize that bumpiness, it will still be net positive for India, is my strong belief, and net positive for Indian tech.
Indian tech, interestingly, the outgoing US President Biden's warned of this techno-industrial complex that's taking over in the United States. It's getting a lot of power concentrated in its hands. Reminds me of what Eisenhower said in '61 about the military-industrial complex. Do you believe there's a techno-industrial complex in the United States and we are kind of held hostage to that?
No, look, Sandeep, I think if you look at that statement shown of its political tone and political rhetoric that's certainly built into a departing president and a disappointed departing president at that. If you take that out and just look at the pure, simple, plain facts, it is clear that American big tech, whether it is in social media or the underlying internet, or indeed in this new emerging AI world, that American big tech represents a concentration of power unprecedented in the history of modern mankind. And countries around the world are yet to come to terms with how to deal with social media and Meta and X and Google and all of this commercial power and the other tech power that are concentrated around these companies. We know that, we are struggling with that, and now you basically raise it to the power of infinity by layering with AI and the concentration of AI in the US with Google, with Meta, with Grok, and with all of these other companies. And certainly it's something for the world to be concerned about, and in particular countries like India, which have a very large, fast-growing, robust digital economy, to be concerned about. Now, I don't necessarily subscribe to the thought that we should now think it's doomsday, but we certainly have to work and develop a model at working and building a much more balanced relationship where the concentration of power that exists in the US and these US platforms is not weaponized against us or used to coerce us into positions in digital trade or trade in particular in the coming years. So we have to be aware of this. We needn't be paranoid about it, excepting I subscribe to Andy Grove's statement of only the paranoid survive. So maybe a little bit of paranoia is a healthy thing.
Right.
But the fact that this growing concentration of power is something to which most of the world does not have an answer,
Right.
is an area that we should be fairly wary and aware of.
You flagged this concern in the past as well, the fact that we have media barons in India, but all the social media barons today are sitting on the west coast of the United States.
Absolutely.
All the platforms that Indians frequent, all the social media platforms are controlled by this techno-industrial complex. And could that be weaponized?
No, look, the concentration of power and has many implications. The worst implication is when the concentration of power is weaponized with technology denial, access denial. So that is, let's say, the worst case scenario. Right. But the concentration of power also has some other implications. For example, in India, and it's true for the rest of the world as well, that between Google and Meta, they are increasingly controlling the digital advertising pie, and therefore are in a sense becoming gateways to consumers for all brands, global or local. And this is true in Europe, this is true in India, this is true in South America. So is that a good thing? Is the power of Google and Meta to control which brand accesses which consumer and be almost a gateway, is that a good thing? I certainly think even for somebody who's non-technical and is not very deeply involved in tech, you will say, no, that kind of power and concentration is not good. So I think there are a number of these things that have sort of crept up on the world because the world, governments all around the world believe that regulating social media was like regulating innovation, and that government should not come in the way of these innovators. And these innovators have, in a lot of ways, gamed that. They have used that, misused that, grown so powerful today. Now you look at a company like Google that is being penalized in Europe, and I'm certainly not subscribing to the European way of regulation, but they have search engines that are integrated into the Android operating system that is now integrated into their AI, Gemini AI, and with no real transparency about whose consent, whose data, where is it being used, with whose consent is it being used. So there is this concern that concentration of power can have downside disruptive effects on open economies and open countries and open societies like ours. And it's something that we should be wary of, and it's something that we should have a policy response for or a legal response for.
Absolutely. And also talking about artificial intelligence, where the United States has just brought out some very worrying rules, which actually creates these clubs. Grades the world into 3 clubs, where they will and will not sell their
red, amber, and green. Yes.
Yes. So 3, and we are not in the preferred group of countries whom the US will sell AI tech to.
Yeah, it's a very, very tricky situation because our position, and our Prime Minister has been very beautifully and remarkably consistent and very powerfully advocating the fact that we cannot go back after the Cold War into another type of a Cold War where there is technology exclusion and then there is technology hegemony in a way.
Right.
And that is not good for the world. Technology, we all recognize today, empowers, transforms countries, empowers people. So it can't be like in the old days where hydrocarbon was used to coerce economies and countries, or military power was used to coerce and browbeat countries. That technology will be divided into the haves and the have-nots. This is our Prime Minister repeatedly said that. He said that in December 2023 when India assumed the chairmanship of the Global Partnership of AI. But I don't think everybody else subscribes to that thought. So you have China today, who's clearly on a decade, last decade, embarked on a path of somehow corralling technology and controlling the future of tech. And the Americans for the last 5 to 7 years were remarkably blasé, because every technology that they innovated was proliferating and ending back in China.
Right.
From stealth fighters to chips and to the AI. Yes. Now the Americans have woken up, and you can argue that they're overcorrecting.
Right.
That export controls have failed. There is still a lot of leakage of prohibited products and technologies, as we know with Korea's missile launches and AQ Khan in Pakistan, that those non-proliferation regimes and export control regimes have never worked. But in the context of tech, now they are putting these barriers and sort of color coding, labeling to countries and saying these countries can have it and these countries should not have it. Will it work? I don't know. I think the US PRC, lot of, let's say, face-off in the field of AI and tech, it's early days. We don't know what the end of that will look like. But the Chinese are not going anywhere. They've got access in the last decade and a half to too much technology for this to do anything but slow them down.
Right.
But I think that is what the American government is calculating, that if you slow down the Chinese, somehow that American technology will then proliferate and dominate and shape the future of tech. We cannot be mute spectators to that.
Right.
We are too large an economy. We're going to be the third largest economy in the world. We have a very, very vibrant digital economy which depends on all this.
Right.
And so therefore, I have argued in some articles recently that India must have its own sovereign AI strategy. We can be and we must be open to partnerships with trusted countries like the Americans and the Koreans and the Australians and the Israelis. But at the end of the day, we must still have our own capability
Right.
to make our own position a lot more credible and strong as we face off with this battlefield of the future. I call AI the battlefield of the future.
It is indeed. And does it strike you the fact that we have a strategic technology partnership with the United States,
Correct.
with ISET, but when it comes to AI, we are out of the club. So what challenges do you see for our sovereign
No, look,
AI
there were two
efforts?
areas that we have been out remarkably for several decades. One is semiconductors.
Yes.
Then during the UPA, whatever footprint we had on electronics vanished
Yes.
because of imports. And we have, under Prime Minister Modi ji, built back the electronics footprint, and we are now a strong presence, growing presence in the electronics GVCs of the world. 75 years we had no presence in semiconductors, and now we are a growing presence. I'm not saying that we are there yet, but we have made these very good early steps in semiconductors. And the Prime Minister last year announced a 20,000 crore India AI mission. He is very clear that we have and we will build these sovereign AI capabilities. So I think we may be a little late to the game, arguably, maybe 2 years late, but that like semiconductors, we will also be a player in the global AI ecosystem. And the fact that our ambitions, our Prime Minister has very clearly said, is to make sure our AI, our DPI is available to the rest of the world, and that we are on the round table as the world's countries of the world sit and shape the future of tech. India will certainly be at that lead table with our own views and with our own approach.
What about workforce development in AI? That's a serious area of concern.
It's true. It's whether it's semiconductors or AI, there is a huge talent shortage globally.
Right.
Taiwan is looking at talent, Americans are looking at talent, the Europeans are looking at talent, India with our own ambitions need talent. So there is a parallel play that is playing out where our youth and our huge community of engineers and practitioners of technology will also be upskilled and skilled in areas, growing areas like AI and semiconductors, and that in a lot of ways that we can be the workhorse for the world in terms of talent. This is our ambition. We have made some tentative early steps. There is still a lot of work to be done before we can say, yes, we are the talent pool for the world. Because unlike tech and unlike internet, AI and semiconductors are really the frontier and really cutting edge of science, engineering, and technology. So it's not simply about getting a degree. It's about saying I have 8 years of deep immersive work in semiconductors or 5 years of immersive work in AI. You need that kind of experience, and for that experience, we need the infrastructure in India, for which the Prime Minister has given money for the AI compute. So it is early days. We are making some steps. China and the US obviously have never been restricted in terms of capital, and they have gone ahead dramatically. But I would certainly, if I were to hazard a guess, I would say that in the next 3 to 5 years, in both semiconductors and AI, and the broader ISET ecosystem like quantum and so on and so forth, our capabilities will be comparable,
right,
and will not be lagging the Americans and Chinese by too far.
So how do you firewall our indigenous AI and semicon industry from this huge tech battle between the US and China?
I think there is a lot, and I've written about this and I've spoken about this multiple times. There are legislative guardrails that we need to build. We've got the DPDP Act, which, as you know, the Parliament has enacted. I think we need another layer of legislation to deal with anonymized data. And the reason I talk about that is because data is the fuel that builds models, that trains models. And the models are the basic underpinnings of AI. The better the model is, the better the efficacy of the AI platform. So data sovereignty, how we manage our data, how that data is accessible by companies that are in the West like Google or Meta, the complete legislative framework and guardrails for that has yet to be completed. We have the DPDP, which is an excellent law, but we need some pieces that are still remaining, which the government has seized off, and I believe they're working on it. So data sovereignty and organizing our data sets into and training, using them to train models is the best way to ensure AI sovereignty. That means this is our AI.
Yes.
This is our people's data being used to train intelligence. So there is a certain amount of natural entry barriers, because an Indian data set is not the same as a Brazilian data set or an American data set. So therefore that becomes almost the entry barrier for anybody else who has AI in the US, because they will not have access to Indian data sets and Indian large language models.
What about social media platforms? That's the
Yeah.
low-tech end of it, because you also mentioned in the past that how YouTube possibly was used against your party in the Lok Sabha elections. Do you see a need for indigenous social media
Look,
platforms?
if you think of social media as a problem, or as a challenge, let's
Yes.
not call it a problem. Imagine that challenge becoming a challenge to the power of 1 million, which is what AI does.
Right.
So you're unable to filter the truth versus the reality, truth versus fiction on social media. Now you have the power of AI with deep fakes and misinformation that takes it to a totally different level. So social media, as far as AI is concerned, represents two very big problems. One is the fact that they are harvesting data of users, which may get slowed down a bit by the DPDP Act. But even when they do that, there is a whole world of anonymized, non-personal data that they still harvest and use to train their models. So there is that. Then the second thing is, apart from the data sovereignty issue, there is this issue of using AI to further accelerate the growth of misinformation on social media.
Right.
So as it is, governments and individuals are struggling to figure out what is right and wrong on social media, what is fact and fiction, what is information and misinformation. Now when AI comes in, and I can create a deep fake of Sandeep sitting there and saying, long live China, and I'm a closet Chinese communist, and I can do that in half an hour flat.
Right.
Imagine what that does to you. And it's out there on social media from a labelless, unidentified account, and you are left now to chase the tail of that misinformation.
Right.
Without knowing where it originated, who created it, and the damage will already be done. So in countries like ours, democracies where there are traditional fault lines between communities that anyway get incendiarized the drop of a hat,
Yes.
there are politicians who fuel that. Imagine what misinformation can do. And that is why we attempted to build this filter of fact checks, but which the Mumbai High Court, in my opinion, with great respect to the court, misunderstood and said it is against Article 19, the freedom of speech, and struck down. But we have to figure out, and this debate is, by the way, ongoing in the US as well.
Yes.
How do you deal with AI powered misinformation? Because it is a totally different type of a dynamic in terms of quantum, speed, amplification, reach, for any government to deal with,
Right.
or any police to deal with. It becomes, or an individual to deal with. So those are really, 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 in my opinion, real challenges that we face. Not in India only, by the way. It's all over the world.
It's a global
Yeah,
issue.
it's a global phenomenon.
Yes.
But different countries approach it differently. I mean, Brazil took down X.
Right.
So a judge there said ban X.
Yes.
China firewalls the internet. Some countries say, like Australia and Singapore say, if you have laws that prevent anybody from on the platform saying anything, and even holds the platforms liable.
Right.
So we have to evolve a framework where I think there is more accountability for the social media platform, as well as the ability to identify people who are violating the law, not saying something.
Yes.
No, it's not about freedom of expression, but violating the law. So,
Absolutely.
so that is necessary, but we are not there yet.
Coming back to the Trump 2.0 administration, Rajiv, Trump 1.0 had Harley Davidson. Trump 2.0 has a techno-industrial economic giant, Elon Musk, who owns satellites, rockets, and electric vehicles. You believe that's going to be the real challenge, the elephant in the room when you're dealing with Trump 2.0?
Look,
how do you handle Elon Musk?
Look, on the 10th of November, about 10th or 11th of November, after 3 days after President-elect Trump won his election, I was invited to speak to a group of Silicon Valley Trump supporters, and they're all big tech. I cannot reveal names, but it was a confidential call, and I could see that a sense of confidence that I did not see before, and I've interacted with them many times. And one of the things that came out very clearly in the conversation was, we are going to leave no stone unturned to establish US leadership of tech and the reach of US tech around the world. And this is not unusual. I mean, that is, they're ambitious, and it came out as a statement of intent and ambition, and I didn't see anything wrong with that. But certainly, we can expect, and we should expect, and I don't think there's anything unreasonable to expect this, that the US administration will certainly push the cause. And that is what Eric Schmidt's memos to the president, I don't know if you've read those, say that that we must aggressively, the American government must aggressively push the reach of American tech. And if you read that along with what recently, I think it was I think Mark Zuckerberg's podcast, where he said that EU's penalties on social media giants from the US, American government must resist it. So I think a little bit of this American government backing these big tech companies is to be expected. But to Elon, when Elon took over X, I remember having this conversation, and I said to him, look, notwithstanding, and I have great respect for him as an intelligent, very intelligent man, maybe the most intelligent man of our times. In India, we have a thing called laws, and the rule of law prevails whether you are Donald Trump's favorite or you are Joe Biden's favorite, as Twitter used to be Joe Biden's favorite. So I think we are a country that runs by laws, and if the law says a platform operating in India has to conform to certain expectations of the law, they will have to do it.
Absolutely.
And I don't think that should be something that they are very surprised by. And these are all people who are very intelligent people. They're not unrealistic people. And they don't certainly look at India as anything but a strong democracy.
Yes. And
so this is not some banana republic where they can come and bully the way. I think that common sense is there. And our conduct as a country and our conduct as a government under Prime Minister Narendra Modi ji certainly it makes it clear to everybody that we are no pushover.
We are no pushover.
Yeah, so that is just a simple fact.
Thank you very much,
Thank you.
Rajeev Chandrasekhar, for making sense of this techno-economic challenge.
Thank you for a very interesting chat.
Thank you.
Thanks.